Cause I'm tired of living life this way. Feels like it's never gonna change. So it's down the road I go. You're gonna hear me coming, just listen for the banjo.
All right. Mic is hot. Video's going. Got my water bottle. All right, cool. 99 episodes in. Now, starting today. What's going on? How are you? It is Wednesday, October 26th, 2022. And it's episode 99. It's episode 99 of Who Gives a Dram. And next episode's the big one. Big one hundo. And I honestly still don't even know what I'm going to do for it. But we're here this week, missing last week because of what I'll get into here shortly. But I want to say thank you for tuning in. And I missed you guys last week. I truly did. But I was busy. I was pretty busy. And we'll get into it. But first off, I want to say that I appreciate everyone tuning in to my last episode with Ryan. It made Ryan feel good that it was a popular episode amongst you guys, the listeners and the watchers on YouTube. And it did really well. So thank you again to Ryan for coming on the last show, which was now a few weeks ago. But that was a really fun episode, and I am going to have him on again along with some other cool people here coming up very, very soon. No whiskey review this week. We're gonna probably go next week with a review, if I had to guess. Yeah, that's what it's gonna be. I am gonna drink some bourbon though, because I am basically scotched out. So let me grab my glass here, my trusty Black Market Spirits cup holder. And I don't know if I've ever shouted out Matt and Black Market Spirits, but he's a really good friend of mine, and I have his little coaster here. This is his shirt. I just happened to be wearing it. I actually did not plan this. But you can see he's a little guy. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but he's flipping off. He's flipping off the. If you bring the pocket down, he's flipping you off with a bottle of whiskey in his other hand. So Matt does Black Market Rye, and I'll have him on the show soon. Once our schedules align, but he's a good friend of mine. And I am going to be drinking a little bit of Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel because I forgot I had an extra bottle of it lying around that I bought a few weeks ago. So, cheers. And you might be asking yourself, Connor, why aren't you doing a review this week? Why aren't you reviewing whiskey? Why? What's different about this episode? And it's not that there's anything different. It's just that I had a long week, and I kind of want to just recap my week because I think you guys would like to hear about it. So we'll drink. Cheers. A good old trusty glass of bourbon is always good. Yesterday I got home from my trip to Scotland, and I figured I would probably just talk about that for a bit, recap the trip, tell you guys exactly what I did and what you can expect, and we'll go from there. I tell you what, it's still weird for me to think that I went to Scotland, and I had a lot of emotions about it. Obviously, I felt, excited. I felt ready to go. I felt like it was business. I felt like it was pleasure. I felt like it was a business trip. I felt like it was a vacation. And at times, I felt like both. But to get on that flight over to Amsterdam where we connected, the time zone is completely different. It's like early in the morning where I'm from, but it's the middle of the afternoon in Amsterdam. and the time zone changes, and then landing in Scotland and going directly to a podcast. It was a grind, man. It was a grind, and I do want to give Paul his due, even though I hate complimenting him. He did coordinate most, if not all, of the tours and the podcast. So, whether that's for better or for worse, it was definitely a rigorous schedule, which I think is for better. But definitely, I think in the heat of the moment, I wish we had spread it out just a hair more. But I left last Sunday, I think. I left last Sunday, and I landed in Scotland on Monday. Like Monday after, no, it's 5 hours ahead. So probably like Monday early afternoon, if I had to guess. Pretty sure that's when we landed. And flew over there, red eye, connection in Amsterdam. Went right over to Edinburgh after about a 2-hour layover or so. Amsterdam is 6 hours ahead. Edinburgh is 5 hours ahead. So I went into the future, and then I went back to the future, back in the future a bit. And I'm not gonna lie, the whole trip was tough in the respect that I never really got accustomed to the time change. And I think that's because we just kept on going and going and going and going. So when we landed, we went directly from the airport, got our rental car, and drove to Morrison Distillers, which is a bit north of Edinburgh, probably about, if I had to guess, 40 minutes north of Edinburgh, closer to the Highlands. And again, that's right after we land. So we land in Scotland. I'm trying to soak it all in, and we're going to work. If you're listening to this podcast and not watching, I just put work in quotations. We're going to work. But it was honestly the best way to start it off. The best way to start off the trip was to go to Morrison Distillers, because Graham and Marie over there were fantastic to deal with. They were fantastic to deal with. I can't stress that enough. They were great people. And they really gave us an in-depth tour of a distillery that's not even fully at capacity yet. That's still working some stuff out. That still has product that's not even released yet, and is fairly new to the scene, but has some really, really good product coming out. Has some really good whiskey that it's churning out. And it was just their hospitality more than anything. So I want to kind of go through everybody that that we talked to, and I have to log into Instagram real quick because I did forget somebody's name. And I don't want to forget him because he was one of my favorite people on the tour. But that being said, oh no, I didn't forget his name. I know his name. Landed in Morrison, then we went back to Edinburgh, stayed in our apartment for the night. Again, it just had just a cool experience. Just kind of landing in Scotland and going right to work was both a bit much, but also very good. This trip wasn't really for sightseeing, even though we saw a lot of stuff. It was more for, let's get this content, let's hopefully grow the brand and make our connections and have fun while doing it, which I think we succeeded in all 4 respects. So we do our podcast at Morrison. We drive back into Edinburgh. Then we wake up in the wee hours of the morning. I learned that the Scottish say the word "we" a lot. And that's not just a stereotype. They actually say it a lot. And we woke up early in the morning, and we drove into Edinburgh to visit our friends Mark and Nick at Holyrood Distillery, which is really where, I mean, Morrison was fantastic, and trust me, we will be back there when we go back to Scotland. But we've had a relationship with Mark, who's essentially the blender at Holyrood, the master distiller, whatever you want to call him. He makes the whiskey, and Nick kind of runs the show as well. What an experience that was. What an experience that was, because we knew them, and they're honestly just like us. And the one thing I noticed about Scotland was that everybody was so nice. I did not run into one rude person. And I'm talking the servers in restaurants, the bartenders and just random pubs, people on the street. Everybody was super nice. And if we're speaking honestly, that's just not the case in America. So Mark and Nick were so courteous and kind and funny, and they really did a great job on the podcast. I'm really excited for you guys to listen to all of the podcasts we did, because they were so fucking good. They were some of the best podcasting I think I know I have done, and I know Paul has done as well, and we both have done a lot of podcasting in our past. So to have this quality of content come out on this trip, on this big of a trip, it really made everything. It was like icing on the cake. It made everything that much more worth it, because we just got on a roll and just started to go and go and go, and we really were able to turn it on when we needed to turn it on, and turn it off and be tired and kind of be touristy when we were off, and not on the mic. So, Nick and Mark, they gave us an incredible experience at Holyrood, and then we went right from there. We drove up north, quite a bit more north than Morrison, up to Aberfeldy, which is where we met Craig at Dewar's, in Aberfeldy. Dewar's, the famous blended Scotch, and that was a great experience, because the drive. I mean, listen. The Highlands of Scotland are some of the most beautiful scenery you'll ever see, both on the drive up there, in which I took a little nappy poo, thank God, because I was extremely exhausted. I have barely slept in the past week. I slept last night when I got home, like a rock, and then Sunday morning in Scotland, I slept like a rock as well, because we didn't have anything to do. So, drove up to Aberfeldy, met Craig at Dewar's, and he was our tour guide. He's kind of like a brand ambassador, essentially, and he was awesome. And I knew I was going to like Craig, because he immediately had I immediately saw a Superman and a Batman tattoo on his forearm, and I was just like, all right, I'm going to like this guy. Gave us an extensive tour, beautiful campus there, beautiful grounds. They had such an awesome visitor center. Sat down with a cup of espresso, like a pastry, and a beautiful visitor center, and it was just amazing. Honestly, I was so happy to be there at that time, and looking back on it, it might have been one of my favorite spots, just because of, it was a bit sunny when we were driving up. It wasn't cloudy, and the scenery was beautiful. Craig was a great podcast guest. We really had a good podcast with him. We really got into some nerd talk as well, which I was so happy we did. The whole goal with me was to not... You guys listen to me here. You guys listen to Bourbon with Friends. You know that I am always learning about whiskey, but I'm not an expert. I never have claimed to be an expert. I think I know a bit, but I know I have much more that I need to learn as compared to what I already know. I learned a lot on this trip through the tours and through listening to these experts talk, distillery managers, people who have been in the business for 50 years, people who are doing these tours every single day. They know their stuff. And I learned a lot, especially about Scottish whiskey, through that process. But I have never claimed to be an expert. I always say this show is for the common man. This is in layman's terms. I'm trying to connect with y'all and give my opinion on these whiskeys, and just leave it at that. There's no bullshit in there at all, and there never will be. And I think that's why you guys listen. But with Craig up at Doers. If I'm still tired, so if I lose my train of thought for a minute, I apologize. I knew when I saw his tattoos that we could talk things other than whiskey, and we had already done that with Mark and Nick at Holyrood, and with Graham and Marie at Morrison. We did a bit, but we were all tired. It was a great show, one of the best shows we did, but we were just a bit tired, and it was actually their first podcast that they've ever done as a brand, which is insane, at Morrison, and they killed it. I couldn't believe it. I thought they were seasoned veterans, but when I saw when I saw Craig's tattoos, I kind of made it a point where, I wanted to make it a point where we weren't just talking whiskey with these people, because I'm sure that they always have interviewers come in, or bloggers come in, or podcasters come in, and it's just about the whiskey. That is fine. There's no problem with that. I would listen to that podcast 9 times out of 10. However, that's not my brand. That's not Bourbon with Friends brand. I wanted to make these different and memorable to these people. So I came up with 2 questions I always ask at the end. I ask this to every single person that we talk to. What Scottish slang word would you like us to learn, and what's your favorite movie? I think those are 2 segue questions into some really good conversation, which they were. So we left Aberfeldy. We drove to Glasgow, stayed in Glasgow for the night at a courtyard. Incredibly tired, and the next morning was a big morning, because in the wee hours of the morning, we boarded a little puddle jumper over to the island of Islay and began a 3-day stretch on Islay. And this felt like the most Scotland part of the trip to me, because I'm sure 99% of you listening have never been to Islay. When I say it's some of the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen, I live on a coastal town. I'm used to the ocean. I'm used to the waves and to the salt and to the seagulls and to the birds and the seals and everything. But there's something different when you look to your left and you see the iconic white brick wall with black Ardbeg or Laphroaig or Lagavulin or Bunnahabhain written right there. There's something that hits much, much different. And it almost got me emotional seeing it, especially Lagavulin, which was the first place we went, and Ardbeg, which was my personal favorite. It just hit different. It was like, wow, I'm here. I'm standing here. I'm looking at it. This is real. This is happening. And that's exactly how I felt. We went, our first day, we landed in Islay, and I don't believe we did any. No, we did some interviews, I believe. Yeah, we definitely did some interviews, because we were able to drop our bags off at the hotel, the Lochside Hotel in Bowmore. Shout out to them; they did a great job. And our first day was filled with 3 iconic distilleries, iconic interviews. These were 3 great interviews. We did Lagavulin, in which we talked to Jordan, who's the head of the distillery. We went to Ardbeg. It holds a special place in my heart, which we talked to Jackie, who's the head of the visitor center, an absolute legend. And then we went to Colilla, where we talked to Sam, who is the head of the distillery, and my boyfriend. And you have to listen to the episodes to really understand why I'm saying that. And I can't hit. I don't want to make this a long podcast, so I'm not going to hit on everything automatically. But I will say, walking into Lagavulin, the first stop we went to, at 9:30 in the morning, and being greeted in the warehouse with the ocean and the iconic scenery right there. But we walk in and we see Ian, who is a veteran and a legend at Lagavulin, been at the distillery for 52 years, standing in the warehouse with liquid aging. Some of Dewar's had a warehouse, but it was just for show. There was no liquid aging. They're aging off premises, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Lagavulin was aging on premise. So there's the iconic Lagavulin 16 aging in there. There's the Lagavulin 8, the Lagavulin 12 cast strength. And every special edition that they're doing is aging on site. But when we walk in, there's Ian, all 5 foot nothing of Ian. And we're thieving 17-year sherry butt finish Lagavulin out of the cask. We're thieving 25-year cast strength Lagavulin out of the cask. we're thieving the 8-year liquid out of the cask, and we're just talking and getting to know each other. And I forgot the tour guide's name that was with us as well. She was amazing. I can't remember her name. But when we're all bullshitting, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. We're having a good time. We're talking about the liquid. We're talking about our experience at Scotland so far. And then you walk around the back with dram still in hand, and you see the Lagavulin on the white brick, and you see the ocean. You look to your right. You squint your eyes way in the distance. You see Northern Ireland. You see on a rock about 100 meters offshore the remnants of a castle that was built in the 1200s. And you're just like, fucking hell, dude, this is amazing, especially as a whiskey lover. So that was incredible. We talked to Jordan, who was the head of the distillery. Great interview, very fun, very knowledgeable guy. And he was kind enough to send us home with a signed bottle of his 14-year distillery pick that he personally selected, which is finished in 5-year brandy casks, American brandy casks. So we tasted it on the pod. It was a killer dram. So shout out to Jordan. Great guy. We went over to Ardbeg. Again, seeing Ardbeg is what got me, is because I mean, not to get too sentimental here on this show, but I remember sharing a dram of Wee Beastie. I think I had a bit at some point with my dad for my Uncle Craig, and I thought about that. I thought about my Uncle Craig, and I wish I could tell him about this trip. I wish I could tell him about this, because he was a traveler and he would have loved to hear it. I'm trying not to get emotional. And sharing, Wee Beastie with my dad. Wee Beastie was the third review I did on Who Gives a Dram, and just seeing it in person it just kind of struck a nerve in my heart, and tugged at my heartstrings a bit, which I was thankful for. And it made me think of the good memories I've had with my dad, and it made me think of how proud my Uncle Craig probably is, watching me from above, about where this whiskey world is taking me. But we talked with Jackie, head of the visitor center, again, who just a killer guest, a absolute hoot. And I don't say that much, but I'm going to say it again. An absolute hoot. She did a fantastic job. She gave us a meat pie from the Ardbeg, kitchen, which was great. I had mushrooms in it, though, which I found out later. I wasn't a fan of that. But she did a great job. And then we went to Colila, which is the Isla whiskey that Johnny Walker uses in its blends. Brand new distillery. Well, not brand new, but newer distillery. Really, really clean, really, really nice. Fantastic view. I actually posted a TikTok that I really liked. I edited it. That was from Colila, and Sam was, the best. We were all incredibly tired at that point, but we had a great interview with him. I don't want to say interview, I want to say conversation with him. And we just bullshitted towards the end, and he's my boyfriend now. So you have to listen to the episode when it comes out to figure out why he's my boyfriend. But he's my boyfriend. And again, he actually ended up coming out to dinner with us later that night. We went to the bar within Lochside Hotel in Bowmore, and he came out to dinner with us. The next day, early morning, we start at Kilcoman, which is a lesser known, I would say, distillery in Islay, but it's one of them. And it was, we went into it knowing probably the least amount, but man, what did we learn? And a lot of that was because we had a tour guide. She's 19 years old. Her name is Bria, and she was an absolute whiskey nerd to the effect of as to which I have never seen. She really, and I mean that in a good way, She really, really, really blew us away with her knowledge, her passion, and her commitment to the whiskey game at 19 years old. She was amazing. She was absolutely fantastic, and I wanted to give her a quick shout out on the podcast because I think we're going to be doing more work with her in the future. Via Bourbon with Friends, and about she'll come on the podcast. I'm sure she'll come on here as well, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to doing more with her in the future because she was just amazing. We talked to again, Isla. I forgot his last name, but the guy who runs the distillery there, his name is Isla, which is just Isla Heads, I think. But he was a hoot as well. I think he was a bit like, what is going on here with us? But towards the end of his segment on our podcast, he really opened up, and I felt like he was comfortable. And then we had Bria on the second half. It was just a great podcast. After Kilcolman, we went to Bunnahabhain. And David, the esteemed tour guide, seems to be a legend on Isla, walked us through, thieved us some whiskey straight from the cask in the warehouse. And we had and I think I put it on record on the podcast with David, but I think it's my favorite podcast of all time. And I don't mean that as in like my favorite guest, because I loved all my guests. I've loved all the guests I've had on Who Gives a Dram and Bourbon with Friends. But it's just the fact that we were in the heart of our kind of Isla part of our trip. We had a beautiful view right to the left of us, the ocean, the waves coming down. It was just so breathtaking. And David was such a good guest on the show. He really brought his character out tenfold. Even sang us a little song. And he just made it so easy for us. And we were, again, tired and sore from walking and just drunk a little bit, a bit. Not, weren't driving drunk or nothing, but it was probably my favorite podcast that I've done so far. And David was a big part of it. So shout out to David. He's a great man, and I'm happy he was on the show. I'm happy he was able to spend some time with us. After Bunnahabhain, and again, my top two were Ardbeg and Bunnahabhain. That's what I wanted to see. Ardbeg is my favorite Isla Scotch. Bunnahabhain is, it has a special place to my heart as well. My dad gave me my bottle of Bunnahabhain 12 because he didn't particularly like it, because he's a big fan of peated whiskey, and Bunnahabhain is the least peated whiskey in Isla. So I found it unique, and I really, really like it. So I was looking forward to going there. And then after we stopped, because it was on the way home from Bunnahabhain, right down the road, at a distillery called Ardnahoe, still making its juice. We were able to try some of their new make, but it was an amazing distillery with one of the best views I've seen in my entire life. I can't talk too much about it because they are still on the up and up, and I'm sure they'll be on the show in the future, but they were great with showing us around a bit last minute. We didn't do a show or nothing, but we appreciated that. And then we went out to dinner that night in Isla. Bria actually came out to dinner with us, grabbed a drink, and that was the last night we stayed in Isla. The next day, we packed our bags, and we essentially walked over to Bowmore, which we stayed we stayed in the town of Bowmore, and Bowmore, the distillery, was about 30 seconds up the road. 8:30 call time in the morning. The night before, actually, Paul and I went live on Instagram, but we smoked a cigar on the rocks, and I have a picture of it, but we, the water's right there. It's beautiful, and then you look to your left, there's that iconic white brick with the Bowmore on it, and, sitting there just relaxing, smoking a cigar, you're like, holy shit, this is amazing. This is incredible. And I was very miserable at Bowmore because I was so tired. Again, running on almost no sleep here. I was lucky to get like 5 hours a night. And David, again, the head of the distillery there, was so knowledgeable and really showed us around well. And that was a tour to remember because it was the first one where we saw an actual loaded up malting floor. Kilcolman had it, but they were loading it up as we were there. Bowmore had it all laid out and already germinating. So we were able to see that. We were able to see that process. And that's just an iconic kind of picture in your head of, oh, this is what you see, like in Men in Kilts. That's what Sam Heughan jumps into, and you see all this stuff when you look at all these iconic Scottish films or videos or shot or pictures. You see the malting floor, so it was cool to see that. Take a sip of whiskey. So that Bowmore was fantastic, and then we made our way to Lefroy again, which is just so iconic. And we weren't able to get a podcast with anybody there, but we did do a podcast on site, just the three of us. And we kind of wrapped up our trip to Isla, and put a nice period on it, which was fun. After Lefroy, we hit up Ardbeg again, so I could buy some stuff for my dad and my brother. And then we flew back later that day, landed in Edinburgh, in which we stayed at the Ocean Apartments, and me and Shanda had an incredible room with an incredible balcony and view of the city. I think I posted it on somewhere. But that's where we started the city portion of the trip. We were moving around a lot at the beginning, and then we had Isla, then we had the city portion. The city portion started Friday morning. We had Johnny Walker Prince Street, and we did Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. No, I'm sorry. This is Saturday morning, or later in the day. Johnny Walker Prince Street, Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, throughout the day. Fantastic. I mean, I can't say enough that is how nice everybody is over there. And, walking through the city of Edinburgh, actually being able to soak it in and walk and see the Edinburgh Castle, see the churches, see the old buildings, see the history mixed in with this great young new atmosphere. Restaurants everywhere. We ate at a Burger King at one point just because we were starving. We needed food. Was just iconic. I mean, I was just like, I was blown away by it. I was just like, it reminded me of Boston, because Boston has a lot of history. Boston is very cool to walk around. Edinburgh, I think, is a bit easier to walk around, but especially when you're in the heart of Edinburgh, it is just nonstop. It is go, 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 go. It is fun. It is upbeat. There's history. There's every story you can imagine. And everyone speaks English, so it's even better. But Johnny Walker Prince Street, listen, I'm not going to lie about it. It was a bit touristy. It was a bit, it just didn't do it for me. I mean, I'm sure for other people it would be fine, but for me, I was just like, I don't need to do this. But it was fun. They did a great job. It's very nice. It's very nice. Very new. Very kind of bougie. Very nice, though. But Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, later in the day, after Burger King, we went to Burger King. Then we saw Yvonne, who has been on Bourbon with Friends in the past. I was virtual in there. I was on Zoom when Paul was in person, and meeting Yvonne in person, a legend. And recently got put on the tasting panel for Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. So shout out to you, Yvonne. That is a great honor. And I'm not just saying that. That is a great honor. And he put us through a fucking blender with our tasting, and we got every single one wrong. So wrong. We weren't even close on the three tastings that he put us through. We guessed Isla. We would guess, oh, this is definitely an Isla. And then Yvonne, this is definitely a 20-year Isla sherry finished whiskey. And then Yvonne would say, oh, no, this is actually a 3-year Taiwanese whiskey, single malt. Like, what the fuck? You're trying to make us look like idiots. But that tasting was phenomenal. Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. I wish I could have seen more of it. I wish I could have like just looked at it a bit more, maybe eaten there. But I definitely want to go back there. That was definitely my vibe. I love how everyone was dressed up proper, and it just made it feel like it was a very big deal to be there, which I was about. So we spent about an hour, hour and a half there, tasting whiskey and hanging out with Yvonne. That night we actually hung out. We went back to Nick and Mark's house, who they live like right outside Edinburgh. Like I think it's in a town called Leith, or Nick does. We went to Nick's house, not Nick and Mark's house. We went to Nick's house, and he treated us to some really good whiskey, some beers, and we were planning on being like, oh, let's stay there for an hour or two and chill. Ended up being like 4 hours, getting drunk because we Ubered over there, and having a great time meeting Nick and Mark's wives. That kind of was one of probably the most special part of the trip, was just hanging out with these two dudes who are on the up and up in Scotch whiskey, incredibly smart and just funny as hell, and just down to earth, and just like I walked away feeling like these are my friends. These aren't colleagues. These aren't people that I hit up for an interview, or these are my friends. These are people. These are people that I not only like but I trust. And that night was just a special night for me. So Nick, if you listen to this, and same thing with you, Mark. Nick, thank you for letting us into your home and for the hospitality. And Nick and Mark, thank you very much for that night, because that was a night, and I'm not just trying to be sentimental, but that's a night I'll never forget. I will never forget that night, and just seeing the other side. Like, this wasn't in their distillery, kind of more businessy, if that can, again, in quotations. This was just hanging out with two dudes and their wives, who were amazing. I believe Nick's wife is due in February, I believe. So I hope that goes well. I know it will. I told her, she told me that it's going to be a girl, and I said, well, Connor is still a good name. So that night was very special. Sunday, we were able to sleep in a bit, and then we went to Down the Hatch, which Paul and I have been talking about for months. He loves the place. We had a reservation there, and we had some incredible food. Shout out to the owner of Down the Hatch. I don't know who he is, but he gave us a 25% family discount on the entire meal. When the meal was like 145 pounds. So shout out to that guy. I mean, I don't know who he is, but I know Paul knows him. And then that night we went over to some hall. It was like McEwen Hall or something, and we got to go to Sam Hewen's event, his book launch of Waypoints. And I did post about this on Instagram. But Paul and I, the three of us knew this was going to happen for a while, for probably about a month or two. And we just didn't want to tell anybody, because we didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Because when you meet a celebrity, it's like, it's like, you don't want to, you just don't, especially when you're friends with them, you don't want to make it a big deal. You don't want to make it a big deal. You just want to play it cool. And I think, that's important to people in Sam's position, because they're only dealing with people who don't play it cool. And, Sam was nice enough to give us his like personal family seats. I was sitting right behind his mom and his book editor, and we were one of like the 6 people who had a reserved seat for us. At least that's what it looked like. And then after, we met him at a hotel that was like right across the street there, and we met him, and we talked with him for probably about an hour. And it wasn't just like talking about like, oh, so what do you do? It was a proper conversation. It was a proper whiskey with friends. And I was happy for Paul, because Paul saw that come to fruition. Obviously, Sam was on the show, Bourbon With Friends, before I was on. But I met Sam. We actually, I do want to wrap this up here in a few minutes, but me and Sam had a few just like, I gave him, I shook his hand, says nice to meet you, and he thanked us for coming. He gave us a bottle of Sassenach that he signed, which we'll be auctioning at our charity event in July. He gave us a few other things, and we gave him a bottle of Eagle Rare, and he was pumped because he's never had it. We ended up opening the bottle later that night with Sam, and we finished like half of it. But we we there was a running joke throughout the entire tour of Scotland that I was told by my dad that I'm from the Black Douglas clan, or the Douglas Black clan. I forgot. I think it's the Douglas Black clan, and I didn't know who they are. They kind of taught us. We Googled it at Kilcoman, and essentially what it was is they kind of flip flopped and fought for whatever side was winning. It was never confirmed, but there was a thing that my dad told me, and he said a few weeks before I left for Scotland, he said, ask somebody over there if they know the Douglas Black clan, because mothers used to tell their children, you better go to bed or the Douglas Blacks are going to get you. So I nudged Paul. I'm like, Paul, and you know, it was me, Paul, and Sam talking at this point. And I look at Paul. I'm like, Paul, I'm gonna tell him about my lineage, Scottish lineage. And Paul's like, here we go, blah blah blah. And Sam's like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I got some blood in Scotland. And he goes, he told me I looked like a proper European in my suit, which basically means he called me handsome. So Sam Hewen called me handsome. Thank you, Sam Hewen. And that's so weird to say. But I look at Sam and I say, my lineage comes from the Douglas Black clan. And he goes, oh, I know them. I've heard of them. And he was looking through his phone for something that he was going to show me, or something that like pertained to the Douglas Black clan. And he couldn't find it. And I said, how exactly did I say? I said, yeah, my dad told me that there was something mothers used to tell their kids, and they would say, you guys better go to bed. And then me and Sam at the exact same time said, or else the Douglas Blacks are going to get you. And we both started cracking up along with Paul. And I was like, you see, Paul, it is a thing over here. And it was, I remember I told my dad about it, and he was very, he laughed pretty hard because he loves men in kilts. So that was hilarious, and me and Sam talked, just me and him. We talked bourbon for about 10 minutes. I told him, he said he's a rye fan. I said, you got to try Midwinter Night's Dram. I said I would send him a bottle if I found it, and he was like, no. Yes, actually send me a bottle. So I'll get a bottle, and I'll find out where to send it for him. And we had about 5 trams together probably. I mean, at the end of the day, we got pretty tipsy. And I ended up going out again one more time that night. So I didn't get home till about 2 or 3 in the morning. I got about 3 hours of sleep, traveled all day the next day, which was yesterday, and got home. I got home to Boston at about 4:30. I got home at my house at about 8 o'clock. So that kind of encompasses everything with the trip to Scotland. That was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, 45 minutes. Holy shit. But I do want to say, to end this episode, I want to say thank you to every single person that we spoke to. I'm going to try to name them off right now. Again, Graham and Marie at Morrison Distillers. Craig at Dewars Aberfeldy. What was next? Next was Nick and Mark at Holyrood. Thank you again. After Holyrood was Craig. So I went out of order a bit. Then it was Isla. So Jordan at Lagavulin. Jackie at Ardbeg. Thank you. Sam, my boyfriend, at Kalila. Thank you. Then the next day was Isla and Bria at Kilcoman. Thank you very much. And to the incredible other people in the visitor center. They were cracking us up as well. So thank you, Kilcoman. David, you legend, at Bunahaben. Thank you. And the gentleman that was talking to us at Ardnaho, I forgot your name, but thank you very much. You were very kind. David at Bowmore, thank you very much. And I forgot our tour guide's name at Lefroy, but we were late for the tour, but she still like took us on our own private tour and let us see the malting floor and all that stuff, and took us through a tasting when she didn't have to. So thank you very much. I forgot her name. And then it was the people at Johnny Walker Princess Street. Thank you, Yvonne. And I actually forgot to mention, Yvonne came out and grabbed a pint with us before the Sam Hewen show. So Yvonne, looking forward to staying in contact with you. Thank you. And obviously, thank you to Sam Hewen for closing out our weekend, or our week. And I think really putting an exclamation point on it. So overall, it was a 10 out of 10 trip. It was a grind in parts, but it was also incredibly fun in parts. I was able to meet people. I was able to, experience some things that I've never experienced before, and I was able to have a lot of fun with two people in Paul and Shanda that I really really like, and it was amazing being able to experience those moments with them. Thank you to Paul and Shanda for making the trip what it was. I mean, without you guys, without your energy, without your your skills, without everything that you guys brought, this wouldn't have been a trip that would have been as successful as it was. I'm excited for you guys to hear the podcast that came out of it. Again, I just wanted to hop on here quickly, even though it's been 46 minutes now. I wanted to hop on here and just go over the trip and say, what really brought me to this moment was starting Who Gives a Dram. I wouldn't have met Paul if I didn't start this podcast. I wouldn't have gone to Scotland this year if I didn't start this podcast. And this is episode 99, an episode before episode 100. And I want to just cheers you guys, all the listeners, every single person that listens to this podcast, the downloads, the YouTube views. I mean, you guys at Who Gives a Dram hold a special place in my heart, because this is what started it all. And all the friends I've made through Bourbon With Friends, has really brought me places in this world that I frankly didn't think I'd ever go, at least this early in my life. So I want to drink to that. I want to drink to everyone that we saw in Scotland, and I just think it's been a incredible week. And on that note, I think it's time to go. Quickly, I have to talk about this. I did watch the season finale of Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, and let me tell you this. Team Rhaenyra until I fucking die. However, I don't think Alicent is as bad as I thought she was. Otto Hightower is a fucking cunt. Another word that they say in Scotland a lot, but it means a lot different coming in America than it is in Scottish. Fuck Otto Hightower. Fuck most of the Greens. But I don't want to say fully fuck Alicent, because I do think she has a bit of good in her. I just think she actually thought Viserys said Aegon needs to be king once he died. And I don't think Alicent killed Viserys by poisoning him or whatever. I think there's just a lot of miscommunication going on between Rhaenyra and Alicent, and they're the two sides of this war that's going to obviously happen in season 2. But the ending to the show, when Aemon's... I was wondering how they were going to do it. Aemon's Jacaerys, who is Rhaenyra's second oldest son, is riding his small dragon. Aemon comes up on the biggest dragon in the land, and Jacaerys and his dragon put up a pretty good fight. They kind of breathe fire into the Aemon's dragon, and Aemon's dragon is kind of like loony. He's kind of like all over the place from that, and Aemon loses control of him, and then the big dragon eats the small dragon, which in turn kills Rhaenyra's second son, Jacaerys. And I think it's Jacaerys. It could be the wrong name though, but it wasn't 100% Aemon's fault. He was instigating it, but he didn't kill him. I don't think he had the intentions to kill him, and that's what's going to start the war. The season ends with Daemon kind of hinting at, there's music being played. You don't hear the conversation, but he kind of goes to Rhaenyra, who's at the head of the table. She's crowned the queen already, and you kind of see her like almost like fall down in front of the fire, and she's like thinking. And she turns around with tears in her eyes and like a badass bitch look in her face, and then the season ends. So some of the best television this year. I was so worried about the show, and it turned out to be one of, if not the best shows of the year. So that's gonna do it. 50 minutes in. Thank you guys again so much for listening. I look forward to giving you guys episode 100 next week. And always remember, whiskey's the water of life. So let's start living.